Following up on the topic of the philosophies of movies like V for Vendetta, to build more so into the topic, it is hard to define what is the sad philosophy behind something, or at least the first intention of an author, unless the author themselves explained it. However, intentional or not, it is easy to determine sort of what kind of effect it may have on society, depending on the way it's worded, the way it's shared, and parents on. So obviously, it is not to say that there should be some sort of policing over art, because at the end of the day, art is self-expression and there's some freedom in it. But obviously, as we are thoughtful of certain things, when we talk about certain topics, or not to talk about certain things, or not say certain things, because they're obviously not, at least those who do not engage in them, do so because they understand they're harmful to some people in society, and in different manners. You can talk about, from, I can mention, for example, like racism, stuff like that. We don't engage in those things, right? Because as much as freedom of expression we have as artists, we know that, at least those of us who are thoughtful of others, we know that it hurts other people, and so we like to keep those things in mind, not because we want to police ourselves as artists, but because we want to unite society as artists. At least I can say that as myself, and anyone that might identify into that sort of category. Keeping that in mind, that applies overall all the things that we do. So while it might not be the first intention of the authors, the companies, even to send a toxic message, it can be easily determined over the surface what happens when you send that kind of message over society. It's almost like a social test, a psychological test. Let's see what happens when we have something like this out in society. Do someone take it literally? Do they see the subject message under it, and so on? And when you understand those kind of messages under the movie, and you see how that affects you, and if you take something so literal, like for example in the V movie, spoiler alert if you don't want to hear a bit into some of the things that happen, which are kind of given from the very start. It's pretty much explosions and so on, as they live in some sort of almost concentration camp like the lifestyle. And as you can see at that point, this is like Hunger Games. This is like, and we can go into real life, like people in concentration camps, or slavery through time. Obviously some things are not going to go away easily, but you have to measure your actions. And at the end of the day, while there has been violent action taken, or I will call it more so drastic action by people in certain positions, in certain situations in time, it is only when those things have been made at a moment of peace and unity and agreement and action applied, that those things have rippled in society. Only at that moment. The violence has been necessary in the sense of freedom from extremism, abuse, murder, mass murder, versus just you versus me, and let's start this FACO game of I'll burn your house while you burn mine. Like, I don't engage in that thing, never will, because I am smart enough to understand how ignorant, pointless, and to know where that leads. Obviously, I understand that violence sometimes is necessary, that sometimes you have to defend and protect yourself. At the case of, as I mentioned, there is something called balance that I keep mentioning, and that is exactly. You have to understand when and how much and how long, etc., to apply yourself to what your end goals are. And the same goes to apply to these protests, to everything. What I'm doing online, I've had to, even myself. So I don't think I have it all figured out, because I'm not a technocrat, I'm not spying, I'm not hacking, I don't signal, I don't informers. The most that you can call informers is just about anyone posting online, including themselves. Those are my informers. Myself is the one getting, nobody tells me who or what they posted. So it is myself going online and looking what is there. What you or anyone might post, if I might follow you or come across your post just about anywhere, through anything. and themselves, and myself thinking and turning things in my mind, putting it. Obviously, I know my own stuff a lot, and as I see it, and I shape it, sometimes I might see it and come across it, and it takes me many times to see the aha. And that's with everything and anything I do, and that applies to society too. And I'm just explaining myself of how I've gathered and managed. And if I manage to bring justice to my life without abusing people, so can we all do it without violence, without abuses? How can we, as a society, ask that there's not empowerment of violence over us, etc., but us as we want to speak and bring changes into our lives, we don't take the necessary action. Instead, we engage into what they want, which is division, extremism, which then they can use as they're in their positions of being seen as saviors, etc., and say, look, they're violent, they're ignorant, they don't know better, this is why they don't have what they have, that's why we're smart, that's why we have everything, because we're not like them, and you're playing their game. Do you want to stop playing their game? Do you want to make change? Think. I know it's not easy necessarily to access knowledge and stuff, and if you think I went to the best schools and stuff by the best teachers, etc., most of my knowledge comes from street work, from work, myself, watching other people, listening, as a kid being dragged around from place to place, listening to adults, applying myself, asking questions, being denied the answers, thinking about them, turning them, observing it. And like for example, as a kid being a salesperson, I spoke with a lot of adults, and a lot of adults took respect on that, and they will give their little 2 cents of advice as I'm trying to sell like different kinds of stuff to people as a little kid to help raise money to pay for basic things like food and shelter. So when you think about that stuff, and if someone like myself managed like that, I'm not saying that everyone's me. But I'm saying that if you're seeing this message, you have a big tool. It's called the internet. And there's a lot of free knowledge. And knowledge about your country, your laws, the means of democracy, the means of, learning how to, etc., how to organize, how to get people to think in a peaceful manner with that purpose in a final, like an action, something that leads to an action that is actually applicable in society positively to ripple the effects that you at least, or towards the effects that you ideally want, not just because it's you want it, but because you're thinking about all people around your society. You're concerned. You don't have to know everything. We don't have to know anything to want to be part of what makes society better, whatever we are in the world. And we are unit, because at the end of the day, war and everything is going to affect us all. So the planet is pretty pissed off. Quakes, tsunamis, hurricanes, hail, snow in places that never ever snowed before. You don't need me. Just take some time while it might not be in the news. The planet is wreaking havoc, And if we don't find a way to, instead of just being angry and violent and continuing that, to find a balance so we can get building and protecting ourselves, preparing ourselves, uniting and helping one another, no one's going nowhere. I don't care how much trash cans you have to throw at each other full of explosives, etc. You're ignorant if you think you're gonna drill a hole somewhere and it's not gonna come and drag you too. You're on the same boat, and that's this planet known as Earth, Gaia. This is the planet, the only one for humanity. If you could get to Mars, let's say you could manage to take all the resources of Earth, fully all the humans you want, etc., start Mars, the exact way you have a plan. There's something you're not accounting. There's no way you can have a planet Earth, the system that you depend on for oxygen, water, and food as very first 3 basic needs of your survival. You cannot make a Mars into that. Mars is barren, and we have to accept that, no matter what. And it's not going to take you 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 years. It's going to take you a lot more to get even remotely close to that, if you're honest with that aspect. To get there, explore, perhaps not. But to get it to be a functional planet, let's be honest with one another. And forcing this planet into destruction just to be to the means of that is wrong. So let's think about the messages and apply ourselves better.